It may not feel like it, but history is in fact on the line today. Not in Penn State history, but in recent Penn State history, the team has never gone 11-1 in the regular season under Penn State head coach James Franklin. That is possible on a cold, windy, somewhat sparse day here outside of Beaver Stadium. I'm Thomas Rankar, as you heard, former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall joining me. We are the brave few here hanging out at the tailgate. This is the Tailgate Show. And Landon, I'm just looking over now for the first time because I have been intently trying to get this thing on air while wearing gloves. You took the hat off.
I did.
You had to one-up me. What are you doing, man?
Listen, I just got a fresh haircut a couple days ago. It's crispy out here with this cold wind. But yeah. Oh, there we go. It influenced it.
If we're doing it, we're doing it.
How fresh is that shave?
This morning. Yeah, every day I'm on air. It's fresh.
It looks good every time.
My wife bought me this hat. She's gonna be so mad that I didn't wear it because we had to go man up here in the cold. But that's what we're doing on the Tailgate Show. Let's start with that because I want to get this conversation going about the cold and the intimidation factor for offensive linemen on a day like today. Were you going sleeveless in warm-ups when you're coming out on the field before you put your, you get all ready and you put on your equipment?
Yeah, I'm even contemplating shirtless at this point. It gets to a point where it's so cold that there is that intimidation, and then there's also, if you do that, there's the risk of Monday that being sick or tomorrow morning. So that also hurts. So sometimes you kind of feel the consequences of it a little bit. And then go back.
Yeah, 10 years ago, I would be joining you, and it would be a contest. I'd be taking my coat off. And, we'd be shirtless by the end of the show. No one would be watching, but not anymore.
I just realized if you're listening on the radio, I just peer pressure Franklin take off his hat and then get him to put it back on. So that was pretty amazing.
Yes, and for those on the radio, I got a really bald head.
I don't blame it. My hat's probably going on shortly. No, listen, when you are an offensive lineman, you got to come out. This is one of those games that you take pride in dominating. And if you're the Penn State offensive line, you've had a couple weeks where it hasn't been.
Landon's mic is low,
and that is where you really need to start to dominate, especially once you get into the playoffs. You need to be able to rely on that offensive line to take you to the playoffs. The running game with Katron Allen and the tight ends blocking. When it's on, it's on. We see this struggle against Ohio State, against Minnesota, back on track against a weak Maryland defense that we are going to get into shortly.
Yeah,
and get that momentum heading into the playoffs.
We're going to talk a lot about replacing some key starters from last week. Obviously, Anthony Donko and Alonzo Ford, two really important players, both from positional and from performance perspective, are both out for the long term. James Franklin announced that on Monday, and we're going to talk about how the Penn State offense and defense can replace those players, the implications for the playoff run, how the players played in their replacement, including Noah Murchie at right tackle. But when it comes to this game, I know that we're talking a little bit about like the schemes and what you can expect to see against Maryland. But how quickly can you get out of this game? Because as much as 11-1 is on the line, a college football playoff berth is on the line. We're obviously keeping an eye on Ohio State and Michigan throughout the show today. But last week, I think, had a significant impact on the course of this team's future with those injuries. And getting one in a game like today would be so frustrating for the Penn State coaching staff. So I guess how do you balance that mentality of we need to be out of this game as quickly as possible, and also we need to dominate this team?
Yeah,
that just messed up my audio. That just messed up my audio. It just went in and out.
That normally happens more earlier in the season because there's not as much pressure that goes with this game. We make sure we solidify ourselves as a good playoff team that's going to have a cold game. But if you're Penn State, it is, coming into this game, there is, still a lot to get up for, and you want to get out by halftime, to be honest. And I don't see Maryland that different than Purdue. I mean, they're 1-7 in conference play.
Yeah.
Their only win over USC, which USC is so hot and cold.
That's been a crazy story this year.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit because Notre Dame today, and there's talks about Notre Dame jumping us in the college football playoff. But nonetheless, I think you can be out by maybe one drive in the third quarter for your Ballard company.
Yeah.
And get a lot of them out of it. So, you do not want to sustain a big injury chemistry, that then going into the playoffs is the bigger problem. Because you're right. Anthony Donka and Alonzo Porter, those were, I think Anthony Donka is our best offensive lineman when healthy.
When healthy, he was the most dominant and consistently dominant of the offensive linemen. Venga obviously has that power and has that ability to move people, but the explosiveness and the all-around athleticism, I don't think anyone came close to what Anthony Donko could do. And he wasn't any version of that post UCLA, but at the same time, he was still a guy that they put into that game against Ohio State to solidify the offensive line. Banged up, he was doing a good job pass blocking in that particular game. So there's a lot of things that have to fall into place for this offensive line going forward. When it comes to we talked about playing those, making sure you're getting your starters rest if you can. And again, I know I already hear in the comments section after the show, or during the show, or maybe even someone coming up to us right now, and they're going to be like, you got to win the game, take care of business. That is the said stated goal. Like, we understand that. But we watched the film, we've seen this team. You've all dismissed Maryland too. It's about the idea of how do you manage this correctly, the plan coming into the game, and then the players you're going to be playing. So aside from the two places we've highlighted, defensive tackle and right tackle, when it comes to the seniors and the freshmen, who are you prioritizing in this game? Honoring those that you don't think are going to be back next year, or making sure you're getting those freshmen that you've been waiting to get onto the field for a while now with those redshirt statuses? Which one are you prioritizing? As we already have somebody leaving the game in a pretty rough state here, if you can hear on the radio.
A little bit of crossbreak.
Yeah.
All right. For me today, there's a couple guys. I think number one is versus Minnesota. It was a little bit, get down, get the first down, get down, get the clock line down.
Yeah.
Well, if he would have scored that touchdown, he would have then taken over the touchdown record for Titans here at Penn State. Pat Pryor currently has it, tied. Tyler Warren would have went ahead and had the sole record, but obviously did not have the Indiana 2020 experience. Thankfully, Tyler Warren went down.
Right.
Did not score. So Coach Rankin said at his press conference, those guys that do things for the teams, normally good things come back to them. And I think that was kind of insinuating that we will make sure Tyler Warren gets that record. Trust me. So
is it total touchdowns, receiving touchdowns?
It's receiving touchdowns.
Okay, so he can't run it in from the one. He's got to catch it.
Yeah. Because Tyler only has 5 touchdowns, 5 receiving touchdowns in the year, but he has 4 rushing and passing.
Yeah. So that's pretty good.
Can we just talk for 1 second? There's a lot of people are trying to sell Harold Fannin, the tight end from Bowling Green. It's a good game. Yeah. I'm telling you guys right now, they're trying to give him the back.
I'm not surprised, because again, it's about flashy stats. It's about receiving, because we all love fantasy football. Listen, I'm a huge football nerd. I grew up on stats. I eat stats for breakfast. But I think there is a fair conversation when you're 6'4", 230. I made this point on social media earlier this year when the Mackey Award came out. Calvin Johnson is bigger than Harold Fannin. And I understand Calvin Johnson's a Hall of Fame wide receiver in the NFL. But there's a difference in the actual position you play if you're not going to be an inline blocker and a guy that can do – I understand Tyler Warren's doing the gadget stuff and doing all these other things, but he's also – he is a true tight end. He's a 6'6", 260-pound offensive lineman that catches the football. And I feel like that has to be rewarded if you do have the stats to back that up. And I think, from what you just said, he does.
Yeah, Harold Finn, he's 225 pounds. I mean, that is basically a wide receiver.
Landon is not coming through for some reason.
Being a wide receiver, Harold Finn plays a lot of in the backfield. So, Tyler Warren deserves this. I was getting an argument with some folks saying, hey, half of the position of tight end is blocking. You have to be able to block. Yeah. They don't, the award, the committee is not looking at that. So, watch it. Hopefully, Coach Franklin needs Tyler Warren the ball a little bit to help him out with those guys. Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break. We're going to work on some of our audio issues. Appreciate everybody here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel giving us a heads up on that. By the way, I know you're not here at the stadium because we normally have a fleet of either sound trucks for other shows or barbecue joints and people walking by. So if you're not here, join us on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, or if you're listening on 99.5, the Boston Bigfoot Country Legends here in State College. We always appreciate having the crowd. We're going to get back to more conversation about this game. We're also going to preview some conversations about stay or go, understanding that the season is far from over at this point. But if it were, the regular season is in the books. Which one of these players on offense and defense have a decision to make about the NFL draft? We're going to get into that, plus the offense and key matchups coming up next on the Tailgate Show.
The Penn State Nittany Lions gathered inside Haluba Hall one final time in the 2024 regular season to practice in front of the media. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, and I was one of the brave few who remained on a Wednesday before Thanksgiving to report to you what I saw. You're going to get that right now on the Penn State practice update. Except, you're hearing this on Saturday. If you want those observations sooner, join Blue White Illustrated right now for $1 and get access to our premium content and intel for 1 week to try it out. In previous weeks, when starter Anthony Donko suffered an injury, the team moved left guard J.B. Nelson to right tackle so he could acclimate to the position in the event that he was needed. Now that Donko is out with a long-term injury, the assumption was that Nelson would move into the thick of things behind new starter Nolan Rucci at that position. But this week was different. Or rather, it wasn't different. Nelson remained at left guard with Rucci, and freshman tackle Garrett Sexton worked on the right side behind Rucci. Beyond elevating the freshman, there was no difference in the lineup from previous weeks. However, what the team does once we leave is an entirely different story. If there's one thing that fans repeatedly ask about, it's the young players that we don't get to see on game day. Well, on Wednesday, two of those freshmen stood out in positional work. Both receiver freshmen Josiah Brown and Tysier Denmark popped in the procession of pass catchers stutter stepping between cones. As assistant receivers coach Mark Dupuis coached his pupils during the drill, the coaches wanted to see explosiveness and power, which should surprise the imaginary defense back in front of them, putting that player on his heels. Denmark has been on the rise for weeks, showing off said power and suddenness in practice, but the surprise here was Brown. The freshman started his time at Penn State recovering from a high school injury and has been in the background for most of the season. Brown was known as a fast player coming out of high school, but Dupuis praised him several times for his explosiveness and power during the drill. Finally, an underrated comment from Penn State head coach James Franklin during Monday's press conference came during his opening statement. Reviewing the game against Minnesota, he called for more yak yardage and production from his teams. While it wasn't just the Penn State running backs, they were a more accessible example due to the nature of their drills. Jaywan Sider set up the team's traditional running gambit on the sideline for players to run through, and after going through a simulated offensive line, the runners had to bounce off a tackling pad held by a coach and then elude a second coach who was acting as a safety coming up to make the tackle. That drill challenged the group to chain moves and moments together into a cohesive event, kind of like a running play. We'll see if the work pays off. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Those are your Penn State practice updates. We'll be back on the Tailgate Show next.
If it's Arizona State, I'm pretty confident. Indiana, I don't know.
Penn State fundraising priorities for the stadium renovations or NIL. Several seven-figure donations, notably for the stadium, but he's nothing for the NIL front.
Look, I think that there is a fundamental and I see it everywhere, so it's not like this is unique to Penn State, but let's look across the Midwest to a Big Ten brethren, right? And they released the renderings and big flashy promo video of Northwestern's new stadium, what their plans are, right? A $800 million stadium that they're going to do at Northwestern. And all of the reaction was the same thing. It was, man, if you just spent this money on NIL, you would have a juggernaut. Give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life.
Your father would be so proud right now.
My dad doesn't fish. Anyway, look, here's the bottom line. Revenue is revenue, and revenue will be able to be spent on NIL, on player acquisition, right? You're paying for a roster. It's the same. It's just the pros are here now, right? And so the deal is spend as not spend as much money as you can on the stadium, but you want to have a great stadium that has revenue opportunities as much as you possibly can. And so that is what the anticipation is for Penn State is if you get the investment in the stadium, if you can pay for the stadium, if you're not doing a long-term, and obviously they are slated to do a long-term debt servicing of the stadium renovation, but as much of that as you can bite off as is possible, it opens the door to revenue generation. It is people who will spend big money. It will make the ledgers high, right? The balance will be higher. And then at that point, you can spend that money. Again, it's an internal thing. You can spend internally on your players. Can you do it right this second? No, but like all of this stuff, everything that's happening right now is for a future that is not yet secured, but also like that for the listeners, that's me winking.
Yes.
It is, that's what's coming is you will simply have a payroll that you can pay out as you see fit. All the NIL as it's currently constructed with the collectives, like that fan input and engagement will still exist in the future, but it will exist as a whipped cream and cherry type situation, right? Where you can top yourself off, but the fundamentals of paying your players is going to be something that everybody has to grapple with and everybody has to deal with. And the haves are going to
dealerships. Be the smartest person at your tailgate. Get the expert view of today's game. Here's Landon Tengwall as he gives you the key matchups. Brought to you by Stalker Chevrolet. For your next vehicle purchase, come to Stalker Chevrolet and save with low interest rates. And remember, only at Stalker Chevrolet will you get the Stalker Advantage with the purchase of any new vehicle.
Welcome back into the Penn State Tailgate Show. We are talking about key matchups of Maryland at Penn State. I'm looking at the Penn State running backs, specifically Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen versus Maryland's front seven defense. They are weak there. They have been exposed by a lot of other teams. And I think it is imperative that we get Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton back into that kind of thunder and lightning combo where Nick Singleton's breaking off some big runs. Kaytron Allen's chugging away 5, 6, 7, 8 yards down the field. So I'm excited to see if we can get that going and really get back to that Illinois, when we played Illinois style offense where we ran it down their throat for 240 yards.
What I noticed watching a little bit of Maryland against Oregon is they really struggled to tackle. First contact didn't always go well for Maryland. So that is something where Penn State has struggled this year, is generating yards at the contact. James Franklin talked about that on Monday during his press conference. Do you think at this point in the season that's something you can improve on or fix, given, that part of that is maybe physical limitations of players being injured or recovering from an injury? Or is there some level of mentality or some level of change you can make? Because they practice this all year. I've watched them practice this on Wednesdays for the last 10 years to break tackles and to make players miss and all of those things and balance. And at what point are you what you are? And then how much can you get better individually throughout a season as you get into November, December?
Yeah, I'd say you are 2 to 3 games into the season, and that's kind of going to be what you are.
Getting better is what they say.
Because there's injuries out there for players where it's kind of an axe and a tree mentality where you might have a problem in your knee and it's just slowly getting shot back, and finally, in the end of the season, it tears, something like that. So those injuries that you see towards the end of the season can really just be something that was nagging a player for a while, and then finally one shot finally did it. So but there's obviously you can continue to get better, but I just don't think it's where you begin a season. The off-season wear is where you can actually get better, define your tool belt as a player, add different moves, abilities. But in season, it is really hard to get a lot better because you just don't have time to do it. As a student athlete, you got to go to class. You got to make sure you are handling your business, and you got to. It's a different life than say being an NFL player. So if you're Penn State today, hey, get in, get out. You don't want any injuries. Handle everything that needs to be handled. Get some young players the ball. Shout out Corey Smith, his birthday. I got him down for a touchdown, I think, on his birthday. I think we're going to be whooping Maryland a little bit, get Kitron, Nick out of there, get some young guys some carries, and continue forth, head on to the playoffs.
So this is an interesting situation, this game in particular, from my perspective, with those players you just mentioned and getting some of those young guys playing time, but also working on the new phase of what this offense is. We saw Nolan Rucci play in a game plan that I think was specifically designed to throw the ball last week, where you had 11 personnel allowed against Minnesota. They were trying to get the ball down the field to the receivers a good bit, and then suddenly, the second play of the game, your starting right tackle goes out. Nolan Rucci comes into the game, and I think he played well. And we haven't really had a conversation about what you thought about how he played. But do you feel like they can throw the ball with Nolan Rucci in the game, given what we saw in the first half of that game, and how I feel like they vastly changed the game plan in the second half to give him protection? Lots of RPOs, lots of play action and pulling a guard over to give edge protection, or two tight ends or a tight end on that side. A lot of screens, not as much throwing the ball down the field. And maybe part of that was changing the plan. But I also think that it coincided naturally with you have a new player at that position. So I guess, what did you think of how Nolan played, and do you think they can do things they need to, beyond this game to be a good team that can win in any situation against any opponent?
Yeah, look, and I think Nolan's going to get better as the back end of the season and as we get into the playoffs, because now he knows he is a starter. Mm-hmm. At no point this season did he have that mentality. Was it the job just his? And he was always kind of the backup and had to fight for some time. And that's a hard mentality to be in and continue to get better when you're not really getting the love or the playing time that you think you deserve. Well, with Anthony Donko with a long-term injury and long-term, obviously, last week of the regular season probably means rest of the year. So Nolan Rucci thinks he's got the job. I think that can help him take a big step forward mentally in being confident of, there's that mentality when you're one-on-one with a good defensive end. If you're nervous, you'll lose. It makes it a lot easier to lose.
Yeah.
You're thinking about losing, it's a lot easier to lose because then that really plays into the confidence piece. So obviously doing some things to help him last week because he kind of got thrusted into that role. But I think today is a good opportunity versus a very average Maryland pass rush to kind of get him comfortable and begin to really gel with an offensive line, because we've talked about that. The ability, 5 guys move as one. Yeah. And, if one guy messes up and 4 guys do their job, the play is in the backfield. So that's why it's so imperative that you are able to kind of all move as one. And when you take a guy out of that equation that's been there all year in Anthony Donka and probably been one of the best offensive linemen, it's going to be hard to kind of replicate that. So you might have to help him out a little bit with some chips from the running back, from the tight end. But that's kind of what it takes. And let's see if Andy Kotonicki can scheme it up today.
So that is, I think, the good news about this offense is going all the way back to what we saw in the offseason studying him at Kansas. There is a lot of, you can de-emphasize those tackles in the passing game by, RPOs, play action, trying to do a couple of things to limit the drop back passing game. But the conflict has always been that you have a drop back passing quarterback in your offense that's your primary play call, that you're primarily designing plays for. Mm. So to me, that's going to be the rub going forward. Is I actually think, I don't have your eye for the details, but just generally, I think Nolan has improved this season on some of those technical things. I know when something is wrong, and when you dip your head at contact on every single play, I know that's not something you're supposed to do. And then when you are thrust into the lineup in the second to last game of the year and you do it one time, I see that as massive improvement. But to me, the real thing watching him is that the improvement needs to happen in the weight room. So like those techniques and those fundamentals, they'll be enhanced someday when he's 320 pounds. But at this point, I think the concern is from that side, there is no development time, even if, from now until a postseason game is a month. I don't think that there's really time to become a different football player. But on the side of the offensive scheme, I guess this is the question is, do you think we'll learn anything from today about any of the plans or process going forward on the offense with him in there?
Yeah, I think today's a little bit more of a straightforward try to punch Maryland in the mouth, come out, run the rock. They will get Tyler Warren the ball early because trust and believe as much as Coach Franklin stresses that individual awards don't really matter. He wants to help out, especially Tyler Warren, the most, and make sure that he gets the recognition that he deserves. We were talking about the Mackey Award earlier. That's the best tight end in all of college football. So there's debate about that. There's the Maxwell Award, which is the best all-around player. So there's a lot of things that Tyler Warren has the ability to win, and I think Coach Franklin is going to want to help that piece of it. But you also want to get a couple different pieces of your offense going.
How important are those in terms of the postseason awards? Is the coaching I understand there's the history of it and wanting to give Tyler Warren the opportunity to get that touchdown to surpass Pat Freiermuth, but I know he's been stumping for these players all season long. Is it really like a thought and a focus in the game plan this week to make those guys shine one last time?
I mean, when it's Tyler Warren, it's pretty easy, huh?
Yeah, you're going to do that anyway.
Yeah, you're going to give Tyler Warren the ball 3 times on the first drive, probably. So I would. That's what I would suspect. And I think, like I said, they're going to get him involved and get him as much play as possible. I mean, you're not going to. That's the other thing. You want to be careful of maybe not throwing to the Heisman candidate Travis Hunter up by 35 points, and they're trying to stat pad his Heisman candidate and just. There's a lot of stuff that's wrong with the voters of these committees, but nonetheless, I don't think it plays too much of an impact. Like we said, Tyler Warren is going to get the ball anyways. So, but I think overall, Kotonicki's just going to have a pretty bland offense. And the good news is it's not as much time as bowl prep, but in between now and the playoffs, you got a good 2.5, 3 weeks. You can put in some really cool little wrinkles to your offense, and I know that Andy Kotonicki will, especially when he knows what the opponent is. Yeah. I just imagine him staying up late at night, just laughing, looking at the screen,
and having 2 weeks. I think that's the funny part is having 2 weeks of not just a bye week, but really having time to prepare. I'm curious about this concept, and I don't know if we talked about this last week, but do you have an ability to get better is the one conversation, but now that the red shirts are over, now that any player on the team can play and can contribute if they are good enough to play and contribute, is there room for a player at this point in the season to make a meaningful role on the team? So Quentin Martin, Tysier Denmark, even a guy like Cooper Cousins, given the injuries and the situation of being a rotational player, I know he's had a role on the team. Is there room in the next couple of weeks with that extra time to prepare for an opponent that you will see something different? And I'm thinking specifically of this offense where there has been some of that lack of explosion and dynamism at times.
Yeah, I think you have the ability over, like you said, we got some practice weeks to kind of impress some coaches. My number one pick would probably be Tysier Denmark, just because you haven't seen the production you'd like fully out of the wide receivers now. So it's kind of a why not switch it up. Yeah. We've talked about putting Khalil Dinkins, putting Luke Reynolds maybe in the slot instead of one of the slot wide receivers, get a bigger body in there. And I think we're both big fans of Luke Reynolds and what he's going to be. Yeah. And we get the comparison, looks a lot like George Kittle. I would love to see more of him. So I think there's a couple guys on offense, maybe Quentin Martin a little bit. I still think the feature backs are going to be Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. Yeah. They work really well together. Katron Allen hasn't been as on these past couple weeks, did not play in the first half last week, and then came in. And the offensive line really had a little bit of struggles overall, had a decent day, but at times Katron Allen was caught up in the backfield. So I would love to just get all that going today, the run game, and just get kind of confidence that I can dominate someone. Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, the weather that we are feeling is that type of weather. And if you dominate Maryland to start this game, I think they will lay down quick and they will want to go back home to Maryland on the bus because it is cold out here.
Yeah, it is certainly is, and the wind is whipping around. Here's our bi-monthly, because you and I don't talk about this a whole lot, but bi-monthly point about special teams being important. Kicks and punts today, if it's going to be windy, especially if the ball gets up into the air, it can, weird things can happen when it's coming down to the returner. So let's have a quick conversation here to end this particular segment, talking about some players that might have to make a decision at the end of the season, whenever that may be for Penn State football in the next month, if not month and a half, are going to make a big impact on this conversation. But the regular season is a massive part of your evaluation as a football player for the next level. So let's play stay or go with some of the players that I guess I've identified. We're not going to do every single player available to go to the draft or et cetera. Ones that make sense, ones that we think have a decision to make. So let's start with an easy one. Wide receiver Trey Wallace. You know, with the season he's had, does he have the conversation to stay or go?
Yeah, I think he's definitely having that conversation, and I've actually talked to some NFL agents about him, and people are high on him, and I think sometimes he is thought of as being a little bit underutilized, and I think people will see that. I mean, when we target Trey Wallace, good things do happen. So I'm going to go stay because I feel like he came back for one more year. He could really benefit from that, and it would help his draft stock going into the next year. And look, I don't know. We're going to get to another guy in a little bit, I think, but another guy's decision on this team, on the offense, maybe at quarterback could very much influence what Trey Wallace wants to do. So I will say stay for Trey Wallace.
Yeah, so let's rip that Band-Aid off and let's talk about quarterback Drew Aller. Stay or go?
I'm going to go stay. I think there's a couple things that factor into this, and we've seen this from Olu Fashanu and a couple other guys. I think Drew Aller wants to graduate. I think he is someone that's something he takes seriously and would want to do. I also think we've seen the strides that he has made from last year to this year. I think he can do that a little bit more going into next year too. I would really like to see that. That would be exciting to see him take even that next step, and then I think really solidify himself undoubtedly as a top 10 quarterback instead of being, we don't really know exactly where he would be in the draft. I think maybe next year might not be as favorable. It might be a little bit of a stronger quarterback class. Yeah. But nonetheless, I'll take Drew Aller stay. And I think if they stay together, I think they will have that conversation. Drew Wallace. Yeah, might as well call it Drew Wallace. Let's see if Drew Wallace can stay together. Let's do it. Trey Wallace and Drew Aller. I'll have them both staying.
Yeah. So if you told me in the first month of the season that Drew Aller, the conversation was he was going to stay, I would have said that meant the season was a disappointment with the way he started. And I understand the teams they played at the beginning of the year. I'm talking process over product, where the way he was reading defenses, the confidence with which he was slinging the ball around, the windows he was hitting, the selective chances he was taking and making, I thought the development curve was going to be that would continue the whole season. And then against USC, what he did in that game in the fourth quarter, I mean, that's what you were looking for. That was the missing piece of Drew Aller's development. And then over the last month of the season, month and a half of the season, obviously some of the adversity on the offense overall affects the quarterback. But this offense has been featuring Tyler Warren. It has not been featuring anyone else but Tyler Warren in key moments. And from a quarterback perspective, that means you're throwing the ball shorter. You're not throwing the ball down the field. He's been more of a selective shot kind of quarterback. And those intermediate passes I don't want to say they've dried up, but they have de-emphasized those. So pending anything that happens in the next month and a half where he gets hot and they win a national championship, I would agree that would be the thing that you would want to see from Drew to come back and be featured in the offense. As this is a passing team, this is Drew's team, where you obviously are going to run the ball. Andy Kulingi's not going to not run the football. But in those key moments, you put it in the quarterback's hands as opposed to – I mean, it's hard to say they haven't put it in his hands because he's got to get the ball to Tyler Warren. But you know what I mean. You know the point I'm trying to make.
Let him stretch the field. And you know what? I want to bring this up real quick. Let's talk about Drew Aller, West Virginia, and then kind of the back half of the season. He took some risk in West Virginia. Yeah. Now, granted, it's not the greatest defense and worse than pretty much every Big Ten defense that we have played. Yeah. But he took some risk. I would like to see him take a little bit more of those risks.
Yeah, 100%.
Especially in the playoffs. And not just risk of dumb, talking just throw it up, taking those calculated risks where I have Trey Wallace with a little bit of inside leverage on a deep post, one-on-one. I'm going to take that because he's won one-on-one for me a lot. Yeah. So that's an opportunity that I like. I would like to see a little bit more out of that. Throw it up to Tyler Warren. It's worked majority of the time. Yeah. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and those are the things that you would see that change, and that would be what would have to change for Drew in this conversation to then say, okay, he's now got the quarterback wins, and he's got postseason stats to back up a decision to go. So let's move on to the final two. I think no, we got three, and I'm going to save the best for last. Let's do them as a tandem because they have been linked at the hip the entire time. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, stay or go?
I'll go Nick Singleton, go. Katron Allen, stay.
Is this a combine-related conversation?
I think it can be. I also think Katron Allen hasn't had necessarily the back half of the season that he'd want to have. And if you can be the feature back in the offense if you're Katron Allen and then have someone like we've seen Corey Smith look really, really flashy and quick, and have that 1-2, but it's a little bit different this time. And Nick and Kitron normally every year they've had about the same exact carries by the end of the year when you look at it. But I think Nick Singleton has really evolved in the receiving game, and being able to, a lot of times he's been our leading or second receiver in a game. So I think starting to show look at running backs around the NFL. Everybody kind of wants that Jaylen Warren kind of Austin Eckler. Well, he's really slow now, but those little like receiving backs, that's what people want, and that's what Nick Singleton is really starting to kind of turn into. And as he kind of just more and more develops like that, I think that'd be great for him. But I think Katron Allen could definitely come back and be the featured back in this offense that's maybe a little more pass heavy, and then you rely on Katron Allen to grind out those nice, chunk runs that you need to win tough Big Ten games.
Yeah, and I think an offseason of development for him, which he didn't get this year, was something he needed, coming back for another year and taking another crack at it. Nick Singleton with a good year might have been, with the skills you just described and his testing numbers and his performance and his size and all those things, would have been in the conversation for a first-round draft pick. At this point, he's still in the conversation for a top 75 pick. And as a running back, getting to that second contract is the number one goal. So I think for Katron Allen, the frustration is you want to go now, and I can see him going anyway, just because start the clock now, I can rehab and get bigger, faster, stronger in the NFL, get to that second contract, and hopefully, make my money there, as opposed to trying to come and maximize your draft stock, which is not going to get you the big payday anyway. So for running backs, it always feels like two separate conversations. Are you ready? And what's the clock like? So, yeah, that one is a bit tough for those guys. So then the last one, and the one that I'm most excited about, because I think it's a real conversation, is Venga Ioane.
Ooh.
Stay or go. He is, I believe at this point, a redshirt sophomore.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember Venga. I had Venga. He was my his official visit. I was his host. And I loved him. I was like, oh, this guy comes. And it was late. It was really late in the process. If you remember, he was Washington. He committed from Washington. So he's cross country, doesn't get to go home a lot. And one of those guys that has really stepped up over the years. So for me, I think Venga will stay for one more year, especially as an interior offensive lineman, to get one more year to develop. One more year starting under your belt, I think could serve him well. But he's been dominant in the run game.
Yep.
We've seen the flashiness, him lining up at wide receiver and destroying poor 98 from UCLA that I'm still, probably walks around campus and people still might say something to him. So, poor
part
guy.
of his soul is still on the field. It's just
Beaver
wandering
Stadium,
around.
right there on the 15-yard line where Big Venga put him down.
Yeah.
So I'll go stay. I think he will stay for one more year. And honestly, Coach Franklin and company, they have a good track record of being able to get guys to come back, especially when it's finished that degree. And now you can offer them a little bit of money.
Yeah, especially for a guy who, as you mentioned, an interior player, unless you're a freakazoid, you're not going in the first round anyway, unless you can run a sub-5 and you're 330 and, you can vert 36 inches or something like that, blow up the combine. Venga isn't a blow up the combine guy. He's a blow up the edge defender kind of guy. So I would say the thing that gives me pause is he's been a really good pass protector for most of the year. You look at him clamping down on guys and not giving up one-on-ones very often. For a guy as big as he is, to be as laterally agile, and you could say, like, he can go into a gap scheme in the NFL and be good, but he can also be in a pass blocking scheme where he's going to be a physical element on a team that likes to throw the football, because I understand the NFL, the athletes are at a different level, but he has also been, other than I think last week where it felt more of a mental thing, he has been really good as a pass protector, and those sort of things are very valuable. So if you find starters at guard in the third round in the NFL draft, so if that's kind of where he's projected, I could see that being, a surprise go on this team.
I do think when talking about Venga, last week probably was his worst game of the season. And like you said, it wasn't like he was getting beat. He just, the Minnesota defensive line was confusing. They were moving around. They were showing different fronts. So the offensive line communication was kind of lacking there. I will tell you, obviously I was coached by Philip Troutwine. He's going to challenge Venga, and Venga's going up against a weak Maryland defensive line. I would hate to be a defensive tackle across from Venga, because I think he has a point to prove when he's got 3 weeks off. He's going to want to punish someone today. Yeah. And I don't want to be the person that's going to get punished by Venga Ioane.
Especially when they were already, in their last game against Iowa, already on skates. And it just feels like if you come into the game and it's like, all right, this is happening again. You're facing another offensive line that can move you, like, again. Because say what you will about some of the guys up front that we've highlighted of when they don't play to their best, it's against superior athletes on the other side. Sal Wormley will knock you out. Like, he's a big, powerful guy, too. So you got guys on the inside that are like that. Nolan Rucci, one of his best things is just devastating down blocks in double teams and stuff like that going into combos. So you've got another strong test in this weather, as you can visibly hear me shivering now on the Tailgate Show.
It's hard to talk with your lips start to get a little frozen.
Yeah, and I'm like getting my mouth is watering from the cold. So in the middle of a sentence, you start hearing the phlegm. I'm so sorry to everyone listening on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, and of course on 99.5 The Bus and 107.5 The Bus. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, please help me out here and like the video. The clicks will keep me warm. The views fuel my fire. So I appreciate everyone. We actually have some viewers here in person. Appreciate that. And ZZ Dewey says Will Howard knocked out. I'm assuming that means of the Maryland or of the Michigan game. I'm going to do the wild speculation of just putting this on air without confirming it first, because ZZ Dewey, why would you lie about something like that? But we'll talk about all of that. Of course, the update is Will back.
Oh, Will's back. Will Howard's back.
Will Howard is back in the game.
Sounds like it's a close game. We're going to get into a little update after this. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, I will do my best to use the frozen piece of meat that is attached to my right arm that I call a hand to go and bring up a web browser and get some of those updates. We're going to come back on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show 2024 as we will round into the defensive conversation next. But first, here we have the Coach's Corner on the Tailgate Show, powered by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5 The Bus, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.
Press conferences are boring, right? That's why we've set aside the most important stuff for you. It's Coach's Corner, powered by Bobby Ray Hall Honda on West College Avenue, State College. Online at Bobby Ray Hall Honda of StateCollege.com.
Happy post-Thanksgiving football day here in Happy Valley. Penn State and Maryland kick off in just a little while, but all eyes are still on the gutsy fourth down fake punt James Franklin dialed up in the nail-biting win over Minnesota. Franklin takes only minimal credit for the play and instead shifts the focus to a multitude of others for praise.
We've been repping that all the way back since training camp, and Dom Ruley, did a phenomenal job of being the quarterback of that and getting us into the right call at the right time. If you had a chance to go back and watch the play, Dakari Nelson's block is like a clinic block, like he pancakes the guy on it. Tyler Elsdon on the front side gets his hands inside. He's got a beautiful block, and guy comes over or he may have a pancake as well. So just really cool that you work all year for something, and then when the time presents itself, the guys are able to take advantage of it and maximize.
If Penn State does in fact take down Maryland and the Michigan Wolverines knock off the Ohio State Buckeyes, the Nittany Lions would play in the Big Ten championship game against Oregon. The possibility has excited many Penn State fans on social media, but James Franklin isn't even putting that on his radar until after today's matchup with the Terrapins, and he's got pretty good reasons to.
That is a possibility. For us, we want an opportunity to compete as many times as we possibly can this year, and if that includes a conference championship game, we would be very, very excited about that opportunity. But again, all we have to do is focus on playing Maryland this week. And if we're not focused on that, then a lot of these other things that everybody else wants to talk about, then those things become questionable. Those things become challenging. Those things become different.
The Penn State defense under Tom Allen continued its strong run of form with major stops against the Golden Gophers in key situations. While Abdul Carter and Kobe King and Jalen Reed have gotten the bulk of the recognition, Franklin thinks there is another defensive member that deserves praise, Zachy Wheatley.
Zachy's just playing great right now. His tackle radius, really impressive. His ability to make plays, whether it's causing fumbles or interceptions, hasn't made as many of them this year as maybe I anticipated, but I know he's got the ability to do it. He's one of the more natural playmakers that we got. Probably one of the better tacklers, just pure tacklers we have on our team. He's got length. He's got athleticism. I'm a huge fan.
Health is wealth, and Nick Singleton looks like $1 million. The star running back has spent parts of the season injured, but looks back to his healthy self against Minnesota. Number 10 had 100 all-purpose yards and 1 touchdown in the win over the Golden Gophers. James is coy on what a healthy Nick Singleton means to not only the Penn State offense, but for any defense's dreams, particularly those that are nightmares.
Nick is looking closer to full speed and 100% than he's been in a couple weeks, and we need that. He's an explosive player, and I think when the defensive coordinators see that, when the defensive players see that, it changes how they defend him and how they defend us. Because if you make one mistake, it could go for 80.
That was your Penn State Coaches Corner. More from the Tailgate Show in a moment.
Nate, I know the nuances. He's as healthy as he is at this point in the year. Yeah. But at the same time, like, he has looked more explosive. That was kind of the conversation. So, Fitz, do you see anything different from what Grapp is asking here of maybe a change one way or the other?
I don't. I think you obviously have to deal with Donka not being in there, but I don't think things change much schematically. T. Frank, you'd be a better answer at this, because the time that Donka did miss, Rucci got some extended run, and you said he's a pretty decent run blocker in his own right. So I don't think it changes much. Do you happen to have the chart that I sent you right before we went on the air? I don't mean to do that for you right now, but when you're talking about Penn State's running backs and their ability to make things happen after contact, it hasn't been great. Has not been great. Parker Fleming put something up on Twitter earlier today talking about the running backs' efficiency after contact, and Penn State, not great. You can see that on the chat. Run game physicality, broken or missed tackles and yards after contact. Penn State on the left side of that list. You don't want to be on the left side of that list. And I don't think it's a surprise to Penn State fans in terms of watching the running game, but those guys have not been tremendously elusive. And then after contact, which is kind of what you expect for a 225-pound back to keep going after contact. I don't think that's something that's been great for Penn State. So you talk about the scheme, you talk about Penn State's ability to get these guys in space, but when they get in space, they need to capitalize on it. I think Nick's looked better. Frank, you were boiling the other day after the game, talking about Nick has kind of reverted to the smash and grab type stuff. It's
just a part of it. So there are two things here about the run game, and James Franklin talked about this yesterday, where he said they need to capitalize on those opportunities to break tackles, yards after contact. This is the direct graph saying about that. Watching the film, the offensive line, and yes, there were some issues with the offensive line, but they also got perfectly blocked run plays to get the runner to the safety multiple times. It is the running back's job. I go all the way back to when I was early in my career, and Saquon Barkley was talking about, like, I've got to make the safety miss. That's my job. Nobody was better about making the one player miss than Saquon Barkley.
And the best running back in the world. Got it.
Yes. But so, like, in the easiest example to show the best and then show everybody else, that's the difference in the run game is Nick and Katron are not on that level, which, of course, one running back is on that level, and then everybody else. And so they just need to improve on making the safety miss, because even in 2023, there were opportunities where they got a perfectly blocked run play to get these players to the safety. Teams started putting that safety at the 1-yard line over the course of the 2023 season, but against Minnesota, it was not at the 1-yard line. It was 5-6 yards down the field, and you get an 8-yard run. That's great. It should have been, if you break one of those tackles in that specific situation, 17, 20, etc. So
Alexander Family Dealerships.
Blaze Alexander Family Dealership, celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. I am openly drooling on camera. It's not cold at all, guys. I'm not shivering.
I thought the sun was going to be out a little bit.
Matter. Yeah. It's just like it's a wind tunnel up here. I just want to talk about the architecture of this particular area.
Okay, if you right now, the videos are going to come out on social media shortly. In 1 second, if you had to give your number one bet for the player that was going to come out shirtless, like I said, I'm sure it'll be posted on Twitter. Dom DeLuca shirtless.
Dom DeLuca, Kobe. I would go Dom DeLuca, Kobe King.
Kobe King. I think Kobe King's a really good one. I could also see Tony Rojas pulling that too, maybe.
Yeah. He's from Virginia, though.
That's a good point.
You got Coleridge and Don DeLuca. You got Michigan, Kobe King, and then Virginia, Tony Rojas. I mean, I could see it too. It's not far off. Deny Dennis Sutton, also an option.
I like that one. Abdul Carter too. Yeah, it could be a lot of defensive guys. Offensive guys, not so much.
Yeah,
I don't see that.
No, I don't either. So back to my complaints about this wind tunnel up here on Curtin Road. Listen, I love State College. I love Penn State, the university. I went here. I'm a grad. The place in general is one of the reasons I stayed here. But when you take all of the trees off the top of a hill, what do you think is going to happen when it's windy? So yeah, welcome back to the Tailgate Show. It's just me complaining about being cold, which I told myself I wasn't going to do because no one cares. But we're talking about the game today now, and we're going to talk about the defense. Alonzo Ford goes down for the season, or the long-term injury. It's just so frustrating, Landon, to have to use that language when we all have out for the year is the typical nomenclature for this conversation. Anyway, long-term injury for Alonzo Ford. How do you replace a guy who was not the starter, but was probably the second best producer on the team so far? Not for today, but long-term. Do you shorten the rotation and you just play 3 defensive tackles, or do you have to add in one of those young guys James Franklin talked about this week with Ty Blanding and Xavier Gilliam? And do you trust those guys in big moments coming forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think, obviously, Keziah Izzard were you including Keziah Izzard in that 3?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Devontae Thomas, Zane Durant, Keziah Izzard in the 3.
I think you have to start to include maybe Caleb Artis. We saw him play a little bit in that Purdue game. And so, yeah, you got to get other guys incorporated because then, if you just want to go the 3-man route, what happens when someone else gets rolled up on, God forbid, and then next thing you know, you have to put someone in anyways. You need to get them reps, and I can promise you Coach Franklin is one. He is one to want to get guys more reps and make sure people are prepared. That is his thing.
Yeah.
So I think we will see Ty Blanding, Caleb Artis, some other young guys really be in that mix.
For today, I imagine we'll see them early and often because you've got to accelerate that if you do want to go with a 4-man rotation. And I imagine they'll be splitting that 4th spot, right? So you're not going to be getting one guy who's out there a whole lot. It's going to be those 2 and then who gets hot when they're out there, gets more opportunities. So is this something you think you'll see a lot today? Are those guys in the first quarter, second quarter, getting them as many reps as possible in this particular situation?
Yeah, I think you want to get them ready versus an offense that you should shut down. And I think also just kind of talking overall about the defense, I think today you get a couple turnovers too, and that can come from up front. If you get some internal pressure from your defensive tackles, that kind of enables that. And I think, overall as a whole, though, watching Alonzo Ford and what he meant in the run game, it's going to be hard to replicate. I'm going to be honest. I thought he was playing similar to Zane Durant on that level.
On the other side of the line of scrimmage, for sure.
It was hard. And, obviously against Ohio State, we had some struggles, especially on that last drive. And it was like, okay, we started to kind of find Alonzo Ford to be that second run-stopping defensive tackle. And then on a hold, nonetheless, I thought he was injured on a play that he was held, so it makes it even more angry about it. But now he's down, so someone has to step up, and that's something that, trust me, is echoed throughout the entire year. The whole stay ready mindset. You never know when you are going to become a 3 becomes a 2, 2 becomes a 1. Franklin says that at least once or twice a week in team meetings. So that is something that's instilled in the guys, but can you actually do it and step up and be the playmaker that the team needs? That's the question, and I think we'll find some of those answers today from some of these Penn State backups that now are thrusted into some playing roles.
So we are also keeping an eye on the game between Michigan and Ohio State, and there might be more on the line today for Penn State than we expected coming into the game. It is 7-3 Michigan. Ohio State. And again, thank you to all of our regulars here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, giving us updates of the game, who are, I'm assuming, warm in their living rooms having a great time watching this on their phone, or maybe we're on the first screen and the other game's on the second screen. You never know. But apparently a missed field goal and a punt from the end zone. So this game going decidedly in the Michigan-style low-scoring defense, ball control, nearing halftime, and the Wolverines have a lead. Even last week against Indiana, from what we saw when we were doing the show and we were watching it live, it was the special teams for Ohio State that really took over, not necessarily the offense scoring a lot on that Indiana defense.
Yeah, I think Caleb Downs with the punt return for 60-yard touchdown, and that's where Ohio State normally wakes up and they have a playmaker step up, whether that's special teams or whether that's Jeremiah Smith is going to make a huge play because Will Johnson isn't playing. Loveland, their tight end, that's thought of kind of probably the third best tight end in college football, is also not playing today. So Michigan kind of had some opt-outs, and that's the new version of opt-out. If my team is out of it, I'm not playing the last 2 to 3 games of the year, and that is what we have invited now with this new college football, playoff.
Somebody asked me this week if Penn State or if players would opt out of the playoff.
No.
Yeah. So can you just talk about the reasons you opt out and the mentality of what you're doing when you opt out? Because it just seems like everyone thinks that opting out is just a postseason thing you do, not necessarily for specific reasons in players.
Unless you're hurt, nobody's opting out of a playoff game, just because that's what you set your mind to when you started the season. That was okay. That's our goal. And if you still have that goal and it's still attainable, and you have a team that is one of the 12 best teams in the nation, there's no way you want to quit on that. It's different because let's just say you're in a bowl game, and even just a New Year's Six bowl game that we've seen people sit out. That's not a real thing. You're not remembered for winning the Peach Bowl in 2023. I'm just going to be honest. So that's why some people sat out. Now, if you have a shot to win a national championship, win a Big Ten championship, whatever you have, you want that. That's what you started the season in mind, and it's still there. You're not going to quit on your team. So I would be, outside of an injury, I don't think it'll happen.
It's kind of like, it reminds me of Illinois, the conversation around Illinois every year about remember 2021 and remember that one time somebody opted out. It's a little different than you are going for fame and glory and also more draft position. The more games you play in the playoff, the more opportunities you have on a single stage for all of those scouts to come and look at you and all those scouts to see you play against the best. Those are the games they're going to watch and remember, and that will actually help your draft stock, as opposed to a 2:30 kick in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl or the Meineke Car Care Bowl or the SunQuest ReliaCare Midwest Southeast Northern Bowl. Like those that you're watching when you're off for Christmas vacation, those are not the same as these other situations. But anyway, when we talk about the defense today, let's talk about what's going on the field today. Last week, did you see a blueprint for how teams could attack Penn State through the air by being more aggressive and not going for those dink and dunk slants and out routes and flat routes? Because Minnesota, if there's one thing I was impressed with, they came out and were aggressive against Penn State's secondary, and they were rewarded for it with some drives that ultimately landed in Zane Durant ending the drive, but they were still able to move the football. Do you think that there's any sort of new blueprint Maryland could try today at least?
There could be, and when you have a wide receiver like Ty Felton, who is Maryland's number one guy, you always have that ability. Now, one thing we haven't talked about, the quarterback situation. Billy Edwards Jr. was the starting quarterback all season for Maryland. He has led them to a 1-7 record in Big Ten conference play, and now their backup MJ Morris is thought to be starting. He came in against Iowa when Billy Edwards was hurt last week, threw 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So we'll see kind of what he can bring today against a much better defense in Penn State than Iowa's defense. But I don't know. I think we get after him. I don't think they will have a great day.
Their offensive line is bad.
I think Abdul Carter denied Dennis Sutton. A couple Maryland guys on that defense are going to want to play. They're going to be excited. Devon Lees will be out there.
Those McDonough guys.
It means something. You best believe it does. There's a little extra hate when you play in Maryland in your heart when you're a Penn State guy, but more specifically like a DMV guy, Tony Rojas, trust and believe. So
coming from somebody who would know.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You take a little extra pride. We're unrivaled, but if we were, the rival would just be beating up on Maryland.
I'm so glad we've moved away from trying to like putting the dolls together and trying to make them fight like they're the Avengers in year 9. Like when they first added Maryland and Rutgers into the Big Ten, they're like regional rivals. Okay, but were those teams good? Did they? A rivalry is built off of mutual dislike. That's number one. That's fair. But then competitiveness. Like we're talking about, Ohio State has a chance to be, the number 1 seed potentially in the college football playoff if they win this game and advance on to the championship game, and they're down 10-3 to Michigan, who's 6-5. That's a rivalry. The closest any of these teams got was Rutgers almost beat Penn State in like 2014 and 2015 when Penn State had 65 scholarship players. So, sorry, I know we're kind of all over the place on this show today because my brain is shutting down and I'm just trying to like get to the points today, but we're wandering into the snow.
We are. Let's. I don't know if this is even bringing us back, but let me pose you this question.
Okay.
If Michigan beats Ohio State, we go to the Big Ten championship. Let's say we beat Oregon. Are we number 1?
I'm not. The SEC Texas would be the other team, right, in the conversation.
And they would have had to win the SEC championship.
Probably at that point, Penn State would be the number 1 team. Yeah, I would imagine so. Because
that'd be cool.
That would. How about that?
There's a scenario where Penn State ends up number 1 heading into the playoffs.
I
would say that
to number 7 or maybe 8. I don't know. Yeah. Like the crazy what's on the table right now with this game and what we thought was a foregone conclusion. We shouldn't. I shouldn't have this week because Ohio State's lost their starting tackle and center. We talked about the impact of Anthony Donko leaving the lineup long term. They've had 2 of those, and probably their 2 best linemen or 2 of their 3 best linemen have gone out for the year. And I think it's had a major impact on the offense in general, what they've tried to do on that side. Because, again, this is a team that isn't an aired-out offense anymore. This is a team that wants to control the line of scrimmage and be an aggressive, run-balanced team. And, they're getting an education in that today on a team that's actually that at their core with Michigan. I want to talk a little more about the defense. I want to get to this. We're actually going to get to the stay or go coming up next because we don't have enough time to go through all the players that I want to get to because there's more interesting conversations with the defense than there is, I think, with the offense where a lot of those were pretty clear, with the way that this team played throughout the regular season. But anything else on the defensive side of the ball that you're interested in today? Any young players you want to get one final look at who might, in that conversation of have a role at some point down the road in this team for this team?
I'll go a little bit of a different route. I want to see Tony Rojas stack another great game. Had a really good game last week. Let's stack on that and going into the playoffs, be that guy that the team can count on and be that guy that makes splash plays. Let's get Drew Aller the ball. And because that's where I think some of these blowouts have been. Purdue took a little bit longer for it to kind of be a blowout because we didn't have any turnovers. And that's how those 56-0 games happen. There is turnovers and the offense gets the ball on the 30-yard line going in and then touchdown, 3 and out, touchdown again. That's the type of production. So it starts with the defense to make this a true blowout. And then I think the offense can get humming against a weak Maryland defense.
Last thing here in this segment, Ryan Sheard, regular here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, he asks us, he says, how does the D-line project pass today outside of depth? Seems like they still are not where they need to be. Do you think that they are not as good as maybe we think they are? Because I think they've been very good. I think at times they've been absolutely dominant. Last week makes people feel a certain way with those long Minnesota drives. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you're comparing it to last year, is our defense a little worse? I mean, yeah, we don't have Manny Diaz, and there's a lot of guys that went pretty high in the NFL draft that were missing.
Yeah,
but still, it's a very good defense, and they're well coached, and Tom Allen does a great job adjusting. I do think, just talking defensive ends, Denai Dennis Sutton was leading deep in the season, was leading college football in TFLs, and obviously Abdul Carter is in consideration for being the best pass rusher in all of college football. So they're a great group. but definitely need to see them continue to take more and more bigger steps forward as we get into the playoffs and be more disruptive.
Yeah, and I think that conversation about the linebackers, Tony Rojas, it's not a perfect defense. I think the linebackers played better last year overall from a bottom line production standpoint, but you're right. The tenacity of that D-line, I think, is quite is near where it was last year. So we're going to have a conversation about some of those guys coming up next, stay or go. I have a spoiler alert. I didn't even include Abdul Carter in the conversation because I think that one's pretty obvious. I don't want to waste your time. It's too cold out here for me to be wasting my time. We are going to come back next year and talk about that, though, on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealership Tailgate Show on 99.5, 107.5, The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel.
It's more than just football at Penn State. Here's This Week in Penn State Sports, brought to you by Bobby Rahal Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Rahal Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at BobbyRahalLexusofLewistown.com.
All magic comes to an end at some point, and for Mike Rhodes and crew, the end was in Daytona Beach. The men's basketball team lost their first game of the season to Clemson, 75-67 in the Sunshine Slam championship game. The loss comes after PSU's 6-0 start to the season, its best in 25 years. The Nittany Lions have a few days off before they take on Buffalo in the BJC at 2 p.m. on Sunday. The Schuylkill County Day game will serve as a bounce back for Ace Baldwin and Nick Kern & Co. after Thanksgiving. Speaking of hot starts, the Lady Lions came out cooking, starting their season 7-0. Gracie Merkel helped lead the PSU team to its first in assists ranking in the NCAA women's game this season, racking up 149 assists through 7 games. The Lady Lions played Drexel early on Wednesday before they took Turkey Day off to spend it with family. The Lady Lions are also back in action on Monday against St. John's in the BJC. The Wear White game tips off at 7 p.m. EST. Erica Dombach's Nittany Lions women's soccer team played in the quarterfinals of the NCAA tournament last night against UNC. The soccer squad made it there after beating Stony Brook, TCU, and Vanderbilt. Saquon Barkley continues to blaze into the record books in the NFL. The Eagles' star running back scorched the earth in Los Angeles against the Rams last week, running for 255 yards and gaining over 300 all-purpose yards on the day. The 255 ranks 9th all-time for one single rusher in a single game in NFL history and number 1 in the Eagles' record books. Saquon is back in action on Sunday against the Ravens at 4:25 p.m. in Baltimore. And former Penn State gymnast Stephen Nedorosik ended his Dancing with the Stars run, placing 4th in the season 33 finale on Tuesday. Him and champion Joey Grazadeh will be in the BJC when Dancing with the Stars goes on tour on January 23rd, 2025. That was This Week in Penn State Sports. Back to the Tailgate Show in a moment.
I thought that the Omari development is important, and I think it will continue to be important. It's not a volume situation for Omari. It is once a game. But if you can get that once a game, that's the difference. That's right. It's something that spans. Yes, it was critically important in that game in particular, but just in general, it changes, how kind of the offense can function, and it changes the score. So I think the ability to do that and demonstrating it in week 11 after it had disappeared for a month and a half of the season is, I think, at minimum, a step in the right direction for those guys.
Yeah,
for sure.
And David says they need to keep targeting Omari if possible. I think the big if possible, or the big thing there is if possible. Like, if he's open, throw it to him. But there was a big stretch there where, it's very hit and miss in terms of, especially with his physicality coming off the line. Like if it's open, great for it. Drew's got to anticipate that a little bit better. And I think that's kind of the theme of the last couple of weeks when we're talking about dicing down his game is the anticipation of guys that are going to come open and reverting off of that and going to the security blanket, which is damn good security blanket in Tyler Warren. I think that's what you got to keep looking at. So I agree with Nate. It's a smash and grab type thing. But it's definitely got to be part of, or at least an option moving forward.
2 things here in the chat. Rob says, you think Omari would be able to beat safeties? Yes and no. It is about schematic structure. So you have quality opportunities like that against too high structured defenses that are playing cover 2 or quarters. when you have a deep safety in the middle of the field and they're prepared for it, because it is a strong tendency in this offense, that opportunity is less open for a quarterback that's going to read the progression and not going to just chuck it up. He's going to chuck it up to the right decision, not necessarily my guy's faster than a safety, if the safety is like grabbing him down the field and there's no open play.
And if you look at the success that Penn State's had on that, it's not necessarily, hey, Omari, run a straight line, run a flat pattern. It is a post that also honestly comes across the formation. I know it's a bit exaggerated there, but he's throwing it across. He's not throwing it down the field. And I think that's the big thing that you look at. And you need to have pass protection for that. And you need to have sort of that progression, that analysis of the entire field of Drew Aller. And it doesn't happen often. Like, yes, he should be able to beat safeties because he's faster than safeties. That's not the game here. Like it's not a foot race. It is a scheme versus scheme type thing. And if you find that if you're running a post and there's a safety right there, like, I don't care how fast you are, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Mech Engineer said beat the safety on the second one that went incomplete. Actually, there's an exception to what we're talking about here, because yes, that was a defense where he got behind and Drew did throw it because he did get leverage on those players. So yeah, I think that's a fair counter to that conversation.
Let's see what's happening around the Big Ten. Brought to you by Valley View Retirement Community. Enrich your life on Valley View Retirement Community's 50-plus acre campus in Big Valley, PA. Award-winning residential, personal care, skilled nursing, rehab, and memory care for older adults.
Welcome back into the Penn State Tailgate Show. We are going to talk a little bit around the Big Ten. Can we get an update on Michigan, Ohio State? Where are we at?
Yeah. So first off, we're going to flip seats here, not literally because I said too long. Spent too long flipping, setting up the shot for the live show. But Landon, last Tailgate Show, I want him to take the reins. He's going to be the host here for the final two segments. 10-10. It is right now tied up, Ohio State and Michigan. 25 seconds left. I'm sure the chat was updating us while we were sitting in the car trying to get warm for a second. But that lead quickly evaporated for Michigan here heading into halftime, which is what happens with this Ohio State team.
Yeah, they always come on hot towards the end of the game. And let's put that aside and say we are not going to go to the Big Ten championship and say, okay, Ohio State's going to win. Penn State currently ranked number 4 team in the college football playoff rankings. Yep. That would put them as the 6th seed if the playoffs started today, D. Frank. I want to talk a little bit about the conversation of Notre Dame jumping us. I know you're not a big hypothetical guy, but how much are you factoring in a Notre Dame week 2? I'll preface it by saying this was back in week 2, so teams can change.
Yeah.
But Notre Dame's one loss was to Northern Illinois, which is a middle-of-the-pack MAC team that is not very good, and they lost to them at home in week 2. Penn State's loss is to number 2 Ohio State. So there's a lot of conversation of them putting Notre Dame over us. The one of the chair, and I think this is really cool. The college football playoff, they take questions. They get interviewed, which refs don't do that. The NCAA would never do that. And so Ward Manuel of the college football playoffs was asked kind of about that, and he said, hey, we're going to keep a very close eye on Notre Dame, USC, and Maryland, Penn State this weekend. So I think there is a world where we do get swapped, and we can talk about the 6 seed versus the 7 seed and kind of the different path there. But how do you see it right now? Do you think if we win today comfortably, we're locked into a 6 seed?
I do, because of the loss like you talked about. But also, I think it's important to point out Notre Dame's schedule, because people are dumping on Penn State's schedule and they didn't play Michigan. And why did you go out and fight all of the biggest dudes in the jail before we get you into the playoff? Like, why didn't you smack all, like, what? How dare you not play every single good team in your conference? So let's talk about who Notre Dame played. Purdue, Miami of Ohio, scary Louisville. They were 15th ranked at the time. Stanford, Georgia Tech.
That's now a good win, Georgia Tech, because they
Georgia Tech is a good win now. Navy, and I understand Navy was 24th ranked. I understand
service school.
We love, yes, thank you for your service, but when we're talking football, I just don't take Army Navy seriously in these conversations because of the style that they play. And again, no fault of their own. I feel like I have to qualify this until we're at the end of the show, but no, I don't really count that as a quality win on the same level as a Big Ten team. That's a good Big Ten team. Florida State and Virginia. The difference is they have blown out all of those teams. Mm. They have put points on the board, and it's aesthetically pleasing. Penn State has been not aesthetically pleasing this season on offense. But does that mean that they're a worse team overall? I don't think so. I mean, I think without knowing, and here's the problem, I have not watched Notre Dame. I spent all my time watching Penn State, so I don't know if they're a better team or not. But I know that they play, looking at that schedule, they did what they were supposed to do, other than they lost to Northern Illinois, and Penn State is 11-1, so I don't take anything away from them. And I think from that perspective, they've shown the College Football Playoff Committee they value Penn State's schedule being good and then winning all of the games. So, no, I think that conversation is overstated. If Penn State wins today, even if it's 34-10, I think that's good enough that they get into the playoff in the seed that they were at.
I agree with you. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background of why I think it's important, the 6th seed plays 11, which could be a number of teams, Arizona State, Indiana, who really knows? We can speculate. Yeah. But the reason why 6 is that much better than 7 is mainly that second round of the bracket.
Yep.
You play 3, most likely that's probably Miami, as long as they win the ACC championship. To play Arizona State and then Miami, and you're the 6th seed, that's a very favorable schedule for you if you are Penn State.
Yep.
If you are the 7 seed, now, like I said, whatever, you can play 10, might be a little bit better. I think 10 will probably be Indiana at the end of the day, but nonetheless, you play the number 2 team after that if you're the number 7 team. And number 2 team is most likely the SEC champion.
Yeah.
I would much rather play Miami than Texas or Georgia.
Yeah,
even though we saw what Georgia did last night, that's still a more talented team than Miami. So
let's talk about just generally what we know about those teams from being alive during the college football season. Miami's defense is not good. I can say, I would say it's confident to say that they're not a quality unit. Penn State, where do they struggle? On offense. And so if Penn State could keep Miami from scoring 60 points, they would be in that game for sure. Now, Georgia has a great defense, and if Penn State can't score, they can't win a football game. We saw that against Ohio State, who was a very good defense. So, matchups matter in the college football playoff, and if you have a good matchup and a good run, that's how you get to a place.
Well, you're talking matchups, T. Frank. Something that's interesting is that Notre Dame's playing USC today.
Yeah.
They might use that a little bit if they are to blow out USC, which I think is a very different USC team. You can talk about Miller Moss is gone, not the starter, and that's a USC team that at this point in the season is ready to look on to next season.
Right, and this is something you've talked about a lot this year of teams that are focused and teams that have given up, and it felt like that team in Southern California, like they'll get up for rivalry games, but are they ready to play Notre Dame today and take it down to the wire the way they were when their season was still alive, in October?
Yeah, I think the answer is no.
Right.
And I think, like I said, it's one of those things you get smacked in the mouth a little bit and you're saying, I'm ready to go home. And especially in a game like this in Penn State where it's cold if you're Maryland too. But one thing I'm excited to see how that shapes out. I think we will stay at the 6th seed, but there is a little bit to compare to. If Notre Dame blows out USC and Penn State only wins by 17, there's going to be a lot of conversation there about where Penn State will end up ranked.
Rob Sherrill says here in the chat, nothing is sure at this point. Haven't we learned that by now? Yes, Rob, we have, but we also have an hour and a half to talk about this stuff, and people like it. So that's part of why we're talking about, potentialities. And I love speculation. The problem is I just don't I like to speculate from having a knowledge of things. So when we talk about how the seeding works, you might as well be asking me what date did something start in 1845. That was the part of history I didn't do well remembering that stuff. So are you offering me hand warmers?
Yeah, we listened to on the radio.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, sir.
You guys were crying like babies.
We were.
That's absolutely fair.
We're from Toronto, Canada.
I can hear it.
This is summer to us.
Listen.
Okay.
So we got some Canadians here. I grew up when I went to school here. I showed my friends where I'm from. I'm from upstate from Southwest New York. He called it almost Canada. So I'm dishonoring my relatives. I'm dishonoring my family today. I completely understand. Landon, you got to get us out of here now.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to break right now. All right, we will be right back. We're going to have our scores, predictions. We're going to talk what we think Maryland, Penn State is going to look at today, and T. Frank is going to heat up his hand warmers. We'll be right back with the Penn State Tailgate Show.
Season, we got a first preview of what is going to probably be a pretty long process through the non-conference season, unless there's something that changed your mind this weekend, Greg. So let's start at 125 and just work our way up. What did we learn at 125?
Yeah, so it was Luke Lildall's job all the way, right? I think that most assumed that Lightning Luke, the freshman who came in with almost every single possible accomplishment you could ever have at the high school level, it was his job, but he cemented that this weekend at the Army Black Knight Invitational. He beat Kurt McHenry, the only 125-pound guy on the roster beside him, 8-2, and then he tech-falled Charlie Farmer from Army, the number 21 wrestler in the country at 125, 19-4. Finished that off in the third period. So it's his job. He's going to move up in the rankings this week. I think I think it was Intermap, introduced him in the rankings last week at number 33. He's going to be in the top 20 this week. There's no doubt about that. And I respect the fact that they wait until he actually wrestles a college match to put him in the rankings. I totally get it. And the forfeit last week allowed them to put him in at the last spot last week. But certainly he deserves to be higher in the rankings. We'll see where he ends up. Check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for that info. We're recording this a little bit earlier than the rankings come out. But 125 is obviously his. Let's move on to 157, T. Frank. A very interesting weight. Tyler Kasak, Alex Facundo. Cale Sanderson said last week, again, you can go watch that here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube page because he's not going to talk for 2 weeks because they don't have a match for 2 weeks. So that's the good as you're going to get is that or us. So that's up to you, but we appreciate you being here listening. But Cale Sanderson said that they wanted to see how things went against common opponents. Alex Facundo and Tyler Kasak did not wrestle any common opponents until they wrestled each other in this tournament. But the key is both dominated. I mean, both ran through a competition that they did face on opposite sides of the bracket in West Point. And then when it got to the finals, Facundo lost 5-2 to Tyler Kasak. So that battle is going to continue. I don't think it's done yet. I think that Penn State will let it continue to play out. I think it's Kasak's job at the end of the day. I really do. And the end of the day, of course, T. Frank, as we always talk about, is going to be Big Ten season in January. So there's still plenty of time for this to play itself out. That is not the first time they've wrestled off. It's not the last time they've wrestled off, but it's a pretty obviously telling sign of where things stand. So I think it's Kasak's job to lose. I'm not ready to write him in Penn for that job yet, T. Frank, but I think it's obviously his job to lose after winning the Army Black Knight Invitational at 157.
Ask a follow-up here because this is something that Cale Sanderson talked about, with these competitions that are going to go throughout the non-conference season, is he said you don't want it to feel like they're always auditioning for their job in all of these situations, but sometimes it just works out that way.
These Alexander Family Dealerships. It's time to lock it up. You better lock it up. You lock it up. You lock it up. Here's the expert predictions for today's game.
Blaze Alexander Family Dealership, celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealership has a vehicle to fit and budget your transportation needs. Home of the $1,000 lowest price guaranteed with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. Welcome back into the Penn State Tailgate Show. We are doing predictions. T. Frank, guessing what the numbers are going to be at the end of this game. I like to call it a random number generator at this point. We don't know where we're going to go, but give me your score prediction for the game and give me your MVP. Who do you think is going to stand out the most on this Penn State roster?
So I'm going to go 35-7. It's either 10 or 7. I'll just go 7. So 35-7 Penn State going to beat Maryland today. And I feel like it's time for a Nick Singleton game because the conversation has been that this team, last week specifically, watching the film, they got guys to the safety. They need those guys to break a tackle and go 80. And the guy that can do that is Nick Singleton. And a team that can give them that is Maryland. So I'm going to say we're going to have 135 yards rushing from Nick Singleton. He's going to have one long carry, and he's going to be the guy today. Although in everyone's hearts and minds, the MVP probably going to be Tyler Warren. Is that who you're going with?
It is. I'm going 42-10 Penn State. My MVP is Tyler Warren. I think they're going to feed him the ball. It's senior day here at a crispy, cold Penn State, and they are going to want to make sure, we talked about earlier, Tyler Warren has up for some awards. Let's secure that for him. Give him a couple touchdowns today. We'll take him over the edge of, all right, Pat Fryer. Papers are flying here at Penn State outside of Beaver Stadium, but Tyler Moore, the chance to break Pat Frymuth's tight end touchdown record here at Penn State should be a good one. So I am really excited for that. T-Frank, before we get out of here, I have to have a quick conversation that I need to bring up. I know you're not as much into the online theatrics as much as I am. The clear SEC bias that is floating around the interwebs and ESPN specifically. Yeah. What's your take on, let's say, an Alabama loses to a 5-5 Oklahoma and they drop 6 spots. Indiana loses to a 10-1 Ohio State. You drop 5 spots. Yeah. I mean, where this doesn't seem very equal. What's kind of your take on why you think the SEC gets favored so heavily?
So it's been a race to get as many of the biggest programs as possible under these two tents, so the Big Ten and the SEC. And traditionally, they have more of those big names that are currently good at football, right? The Pac-12 was a dying beast. And the Big Ten, they signed the League of Extraordinary Friendship where we're all going to compete together and we're all going to make sure that academics is important. And then they went and they stuck a knife in the back of the Pac-12 because they didn't have their own TV network and they weren't making any money, so all those schools were struggling. The Big 12 was okay, and you're getting all of those schools. But both conferences are good. And so, like I've talked about all year, the middle has eaten itself. And so you just have those marquee programs that are still at the top in the SEC. You don't have a Michigan this year that makes everyone think, oh, the Big Ten, they're loaded.
You're absolutely right. I think it definitely stems from how big your brand is. Yeah. And they want the biggest brands. And they, it's funny, they even said that. They didn't lie. They came out when they said the college football playoffs and how teams are considered. They said down to the amount of hotels you can provide for a home game. That's all going to be considered.
This is a money-making thing.
It is. It's amazing. I mean, some of the little things that people will notice if you come for a home game at Penn State, if we have a home playoff game, you will see no Wise, Geisinger, PNC, Penn State sponsors. It is going to all be the college football playoff sponsors throughout the stadium.
It's basically an away game for both teams. They just host it here.
It is. Yeah. Like, for example, whoever comes to town, they get control of the scoreboard. So they'll get to put on, if whoever it may be, if it's Arizona State, they get to play a little hype music and their intro. Weird. And it's going to be weird. I don't know how you go about that with like a clock operations from that standpoint, but I'm kind of excited to see where it goes. And as we keep an eye on Michigan, Ohio State, there is that opportunity for Penn State to go to the Big Ten championship if Michigan beats Ohio State. If that does happen, really where we go from there is if Penn State will play Oregon, the number 1 team in the nation, if we do get sent to the Big Ten championship. And then if we win, we're probably the number 1 team in the nation with a first-round bye. If we lose the Big Ten championship, I think we would be right back where we are, 5, 6, 7, or 8, hosting a home playoff game.
One last thing, no clarity as of yet on Billy Edwards Jr., the quarterback from Maryland. He is questionable, so that not resolved here by the injury update, which just came out before the game. But that'll do it today for the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. I'm Thomas Frank Carr for Landon Tengwall, for our awesome crew that are here braving the elements with us. Thank you so much. We're obviously going to be back for the playoffs, and what iteration and where is still to be determined. So join us then. We'll talk to you at that point.
You've been listening to the Penn State